Well, hello there, and welcome to Mark My Words, where we talk to entrepreneurs about their career transition, their life journey, and of course, where they're at today and how they got there. And today, I am really excited to talk to Roman Mironov. He is a relationship coach, and he has a really interesting story. He immigrated to Canada just a few years ago from an underdeveloped country in Russia. He's been a translator. He has had a really interesting road of ups and downs to get where he is today. And if you watch his content on YouTube, like I've been preparing for this episode, there's no doubt you're going to want to hit play on the next video and the next video and the next video. Really interesting dude. Roman, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on Mark My Words. How you doing today?
Hi, Mark. I'm excited about our conversation today, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be on Mark My Words. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Hey, it's a real pleasure to have you on here. And as I watched more of your videos, I'm like, man, I want to watch more and I want to know more. So that to me has all the makings of a great guest. And you have what I feel embodies what I try to make this podcast all about. You've such an interesting story. You've gone through a lot. Let's start from kind of the beginning. Let's talk about you just growing up. I read somewhere that you said it was kind of like an underdeveloped country in Russia. What was that like?
Well, yeah, that's true. Russia is a third world country, to be honest, and even though it's a huge military power, it's still underdeveloped compared to first world countries. And it was at that point, I did not have another reference point in my life, so I didn't know that I was in an underdeveloped country. I just took it as the normal way of things, studying. And but after I started watching American movies, after I started reading American books and European books, I realized that there is a higher quality of life that people are living, and this is something that I want for myself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, on the flip side, working in the field I've been in, I've had to work on a lot of documentaries about very underdeveloped countries and maybe even countries that are very militaristically led. And you can tell in just from those documentaries. And I'm thinking of one in particular that Lisa Ling did, where it was like in North Korea and like they are with the people and the people just don't see what they're missing out on. They only know that way of life. So for me to see that is like really eye opening. And I can only imagine what the flip side of that, how that really touched you. I mean, what American movies did you watch that you were like, okay, I want my life to be a little more like that?
You're gonna laugh, but those were action movies.
Okay, no, that's
Yeah,
cool.
like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm
Okay.
actually a big fan of him.
Yeah, who isn't? So
Yes,
it wasn't Kindergarten Cop that impacted you. It was something more like Terminator, right?
Terminator. You're right.
Right. No, hey, that's cool. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. We're guys, we're supposed to like action movies, I guess. So no, that's awesome. So from there, that was starting to impact you, and you're still living in your country. But my impression, based on just reading up on you, is that you still became like an entrepreneur during that time, being a translator. How did that come about?
That's right. So I studied. So in college, my major was English language and literature. But when I finished college, I had no idea what I would be, and I was really uncertain, and I did not feel good about what was happening to me because I didn't really have a future path in front of me. But luckily enough, I found a company back in my city which was actually doing translations, and I never realized that translations were, getting so popular, and because people were able to buy more stuff, and because of online, because people needed a lot of information on the internet and they wanted that information in their own language. So localization and translation were booming at that point. So I was employed by this company. I worked there for 8 months, and then I realized, okay, I can actually go into business for myself. So that's what I did, and this was a huge transition for me from that uncertainty that I had after finishing college, and then to having own my own business, actually with a partner that I liked a lot. But that transition was just happened within 1 year, and I'm so grateful for it. And after that, I had been a translator for almost 14 years before actually moving to Canada.
So do you still do translating on the side, or are you just totally focused on being a relationship coach now?
I am totally focused on being a relationship coach, and maybe let's say in the last 6 months, I did like a couple of hours of translation.
So going back to those days, when you became, well, first of all, when you went to school for translation, I mean, it looks like you had basically, I'm looking at LinkedIn, you put English language and literature as your major, but did you study anything else? Is it like, because I know in America they make you study all kinds of stuff and do all kinds of stuff, and then oh yeah, you have your major too. Was it just focused on your major and that's it, or did you have to like become a well-rounded person?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. Yeah, we had a lot of different subjects, including philosophy, of course, physical training, linguistics, Russian literature, history, and whatnot. Really, that was the idea, because I was I was studying to become actually a teacher of English language and literature, and as a teacher, as a potential teacher, I had to develop, like you said, be a well-rounded person so that I could teach my students to be the same.
No, that's really interesting because I know every country has a different philosophy. And I know, let's say in Germany, they make you think about what you're going to be at an early age. And they try to, build you up to be that particular thing for your whole life. So it's really interesting to hear there's a little bit of a similarity there. Did you think growing up that that was a career path you were going to take, or was there something else you wanted to do?
No, I had no idea about my career path. It actually, it actually developed as I was moving. So when I went to college, I had no idea that I wanted to be a teacher, and probably no, because teachers don't get really paid too much in Russia, and I don't feel that this profession is really respected at this point, because for this very reason, that the wage is very low. And but after I finished college, I became employed as a translator by this company, and then after 8 months, I went to, as I said, create my own business. And so the path was sort of uncovering in front of me as I took those steps.
So when you took the step to create your company, were there any like learning curves? Was it really simple for you to do that? What did you learn during that experience of the first time around of being an entrepreneur?
Well, the most important lesson was that I was too much of a workaholic, and that actually ruined my first company. With this company, we founded it with my partner, and I was a workaholic, and he was a hard worker, but not a workaholic. And at that point, he actually got married, so he wanted to spend quite a lot of time with his wife, whereas I had a girlfriend, but my entire focus was on work. So I made it my job to work huge hours, like 15 hours or 16 hours every day, and I wanted to translate every text by myself. So I was sort of setting high standards for myself and wanted to pursue them all the time, wanted to hit those records. And that resulted in the fact that my partner did not feel good about it because he didn't want to work 16 hours per day. So this created tension between us. That's one thing. And on the other hand, I felt resentment building up in me towards him because I thought that I could do much better by myself because I actually had this, this willingness to work a lot, whereas he didn't. So I started to think about leaving him, and that's what I eventually did. And I think that this was a mistake.
So you feel like even though you were carrying the load, that it was a mistake because you still had somebody to fall back on when it was a collaborative environment.
Yeah, that is true, and I do believe that it's the direction that I was taking was basically incorrect because I wanted to translate myself. I wanted to be the operator of the business, not the owner. And he was always suggesting that we should go the owner path and actually delegate to other people as much as possible so that we can actually grow our company instead of focusing on just the work that we can do between the two of us.
Interesting. So that's a part of your story I obviously did not know. I know there's another aspect of your story that plays in as well. And I don't know if you're wanting to talk about that or not, but I know you talk about a little bit about your marriage and the role that all that was playing and really kind of developed into eventually your idea for where you're at now as a relationship coach. So I guess I hate to use the word inspiration, but a lot of the inspiration for what you're doing now was rooted in that. At least that's the impression I'm getting. So wondering if you want to talk a little bit about that part of your story and how all of that developed. I know you went to the Tony Robbins School of Coaching for a while, and that helped to kind of bring you to where you're at. So kind of put the puzzle together for me here and tell us how all of this came to fruition.
Okay. Yeah, it's a long story, but I'll try to make a short of it. I got married in 2007 and got divorced in 2013. And one of the problems that led to my divorce was, again, I was a workaholic and I did not really have any relationship skills. I was thinking of my wife as if she were a man, really. So I treated her like a man because I didn't know the difference between masculinity and femininity. So what happened as a result of me being at work all the time was that we created tension between us. We stopped communicating properly, and she got really fed up with it and filed for a divorce. And that's what this is the result that I got after years of being a workaholic and after years of actually neglecting my relationship. And after that, that was a very painful moment, let me tell you. And I realized two things. So yeah, first of all, I did not have the relationship skills. The time that I should have been developing them back in my teens, I spent being very shy and not talking to girls. So I did not know what girls are about. And the second thing I realized, okay, now I'm 32 and I need to actually put myself out there and get back to the dating world, even though this is uncomfortable. And to do that, I also need to develop dating skills and relationship skills. Otherwise, I won't be able to even communicate, even to approach a woman. So I did that. I spent the next about 5 or 6 years actually talking to women, understanding them better, and learning all those dating and relationship skills. And after that, after moving to Canada, I realized that, okay, now I have invested so much time into this, and now that I understand the skills so much better, I can actually become a coach and help people with that. And I experimented with this. I see that I actually can help people in this area, and that's why I'm doing it full time now.
So, what was it about like the Tony Robbins school that made you think, wow, okay, this is something that I can do? What exactly did you learn there?
Okay, I chose his school because I'm a big fan, and the reason why I'm such a big fan of Tony Robbins is that his tools helped me beat a mild depression about 10 years ago, and so I'm a big believer in what he teaches, and basically a big believer in self-development and personal growth. So what I learned in the course, in this official Tony Robbins program, is a lot about actually, yes, relationships and how as a coach I can actually help people. And one thing that he teaches that I like is this system of 6 human needs, which allow us to actually look at a person's behavior and see why he does what he does or she does what she does, and actually show them, explain to them what's happening in their life, what's the reason through those needs, and then also show them better ways to meet their needs.
So, you're not only dealing with people that are currently in relationships, you're also helping people who might be single, might be dealing with issues that are helping them from having healthier relationships to develop those skills, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Those are two big categories. The first one is people with relationship issues, and the second one, people who want to find love, who feel lonely, and who realize that it's true. It's true that without a good relationship in our life, it's pretty difficult to be happy.
Yeah, no, it can be. So, what was it this time that made you want to start up this company, and what were the challenges, if any?
Yeah. Well, one big reason for me to switch from translation to coaching is that I feel that with artificial intelligence, the translation is becoming less of a lucrative field because artificial intelligence is simply replacing human translators, and oftentimes I would say a lot of new translators and even professional translators who have been working for a long time, they can't compete with artificial intelligence. And that was one reason. Another reason was that I felt that I could actually help people with this. I I went through the process myself from being basically knowing nothing about relationships to understanding them better, being able to help other people with that. And another big reason is that as a fan of self-improvement, as like what I call a self-development junkie, I I feel fantastic when I'm able to help people make positive changes in their life. That was a big reason. And the main challenge in starting this business is marketing. Yeah, because the space is pretty crowded. There's quite a lot of competition in it, and so it makes it difficult to actually reach your potential clients because there is so much information out there.
So you seem like you have a lot of like self-awareness. Did you use that self-awareness to kind of coach yourself out of being depressed? Because I know I read somewhere that were depressed, you were struggling, and I feel like you have so much self-awareness. Did you talk to somebody about some of the things you were going through, or was it just all of the self-awareness and study and you just gained clarity that way? How did that come about for you?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. My first depression was back in 2008, and it was because my dog had died tragically, and I loved that dog so much. And I was such a perfectionist at that time that I just could not simply live with the thought that everything had been so good before this death, and then it changed. So I could not accept that change. And I did not use any professional help. And one reason is that I'm a guy, and guys don't think think that they can actually resolve all their issues by themselves, which is a problem in and of itself. And in Russia, people don't do therapy, people don't do coaching. One reason is that they just don't have money for that. And another reason is it's not in our culture, because let's say if you think about North American culture, you could say that this has been a therapy culture for quite a few years now, but it's not the same thing with Russia. So yeah, what I did was basically resorting to self-awareness and really trying to understand how I felt and being an outside observer, making sure that I don't identify myself with those thoughts, with the depressive thoughts. So really like stepping out of my head. That was one thing. And the second thing, I kept bombarding my mind with positive information, with all the personal growth materials I could get my hands on. And this feeding my mind with this positive and motivating stuff really helped, because I believe that this is how we program ourselves.
Right. I mean, let me just say that I kind of grew up in a similar situation where going to a therapist was, at least I feel from where I came from, was viewed a little bit taboo. Like, oh, that's weird. Psychiatrists and therapists are weird. You don't do that. You just stuff everything down and figure it out yourself. And I'm a very independent guy, so I still tend to do that. But there's been two times in my life now where I went to a therapist, and one of those times was actually last year during the pandemic and just everything going on. I was working in an environment where all I was hearing about was the pandemic and everything going wrong with the world. And that was really hard, in addition to trying to start up this podcast and trying to build myself up. It was just so much. And I actually almost decided to stop doing this show, but it was actually going to the therapist and the coach for however many weeks I did. It was like a 9-week program that is actually a big reason why you and I are here today, because they were like, it sounds like your show and your concept is a really good idea. You should keep doing it. Like, what are you doing? Don't stop. And they were very positive, and it kind of got me out of the funk that I think a lot of us were going through because, well, it was 2020. And then the other time was just me never talking about things I went through when I was growing up, because I went through a whole lot and didn't really talk about it. I was just taught not to talk about anything. I went to the therapist, and it really kind of helped me to cleanse myself of a lot of that. I mean, it doesn't all go away and you have a white picket fence life and everything's perfect, but I think it helped me to move on a little bit, and it just helped to cleanse myself. So that's what I got out of being a patient with a therapist. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I can relate to the stigma and how taboo that might be to go to a therapist.
Yes, and I so much respect you for breaking this taboo in your life and seeing the positive results from it and actually sticking with the podcast. Good job.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's that positive energy that I loved in your videos. So you just every video you're just like all energy, very positive. I loved watching your videos, and I know that that's only one aspect of what you do. What are some other aspects of your coaching and what you're doing today?
Another aspect is is actually helping a person make a transformation that is important to them. Let's take an example of a woman who came to me about a few months ago, and she felt that her husband was becoming distant, and not just distant. He actually told her at one point that he's going to leave, and he set a date. He set a date for the day when he wanted to separate. He wanted to leave home, and she came to me and asked, "Okay, what should I do? What should I do?" And I helped her. I helped her to really think differently. I told her, okay, so he is pulling away, and you basically need to mirror his behavior. Don't push him. Just be kind, be loving, give love unconditionally, but don't make him feel responsible to love you back. So just give him your love, and that's it. And she'll listen, and just as I thought he was able to recover, and he came back, and now everything is pretty much the same as it was before this whole thing started. So listening to her talking about these results and how she was able to actually save her marriage, whereas if she had chosen a different way to treat this, let's say if she had scolded her husband or tried to push him to come back, instead of developing that unconditional love attitude, that warm attitude, and being understanding, that would have been a very different result.
Well, it seems like a lot of your work is to try to help heal relationships and to bring people back together. Are there any situations where you've been like, okay, I'm not really sure this approach is going to work? Maybe breaking up is better. Have Have you ever been faced with a situation like that?
Yes, definitely. And oftentimes, well, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but sometimes it is really, really healthier to break up. And what I usually do is I give my client a 90-day challenge. I tell them, okay, we're going to practice unconditional love for 90 days, not expecting anything in return. And if that doesn't work, then you have a right and maybe even a responsibility not to hang on to this relationship any longer because it's not going to work out. So that's why it's better to break up.
And sometimes that's the only answer. I mean, I know just from my own experiences that you put 110% in, you work, you work, you work. Sometimes the other person doesn't put in the work, but they don't really want to tell you that their mind is somewhere else. And sometimes when it hits that point, best thing to do is to just move on.
That's true. It's sad, and oftentimes this is not necessary because you can actually save the relationship. Because what often happens is that a person cannot sustain a relationship because of their own issues. And when they go into a different relationship, they just carry over those issues into the new relationship. Let's say they want to change the partner because they don't like something in their partner. And it's very likely that the next person that they find will have the same quote unquote problems. And the way to deal with these problems is to actually eradicate them in yourself by becoming more accepting. And well, that's the answer.
Right. And I mean, when you talk about some of this stuff, I think about my first real relationship where I felt like we probably could have salvaged the relationship and fixed it. And I worked so hard just to like ask the right questions and to, back off, to be a little more pushy about it. And they just did not want to open up. And I'm like, well, if they're not going to open up, like what else can I do? So sometimes it's just from my personal experience, it's like sometimes like the best way to just be healthy for yourself, unfortunately, sometimes is to just throw in the towel, and it sucks. I wish that people would view it more the way you do, where like, look, there is a way to heal and to bring everybody together and get on the same page, but not everybody wants that for some reason, and it boggles my mind. It's like, wow, what are we doing then? Like, what? I guess I'm pretty passionate about some of this stuff. I don't know, but yeah, I that's why I love what you're doing. I think your attitude about it is really great.
Yeah, well, thank you. And how long have you been married?
I am going on 5 years this year.
That's good. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
and
believe that all that experience that you've been talking about, it actually is the thing that helps you be a great partner in this marriage.
well, hey, you should give a lot of the credit to my wife too. I mean, she's pretty great too, and I know this is like the one relationship where I feel like both parties are working equally as hard to keep each other happy and to listen and understand, and it it can happen. It is possible to meet somebody who will be an equal partner and really great. And yeah, I mean, it took me till I was in like my 30s. I always tell people one thing I always tell people is don't have a serious relationship until you're in your 30s. Because I feel like by the time we're in our 30s, that's when we really start to know ourselves and to really grow as people. Because I feel like when we're in our teens and 20s, I mean, yeah, we should be having fun. And I tried to unsuccessfully have fun back in those days. It's hard to be somebody who has kind of values I feel like I have, but still have some fun. And it's hard to like get on the same page. But I feel like once you hit your 30s, I feel like everybody starts to get on that same page. And maybe I grew up in the wrong place. I don't know. But that's what I learned. I always tell people wait till you're in your 30s and then get married. I'm probably like an old soul in that way. Like maybe I sound like an old man, but
Look, there is wisdom in these words, definitely. It's not black and white, right? But
no.
there's definitely a good point here, because especially for men, we need to mature. We need to, and as we mature, we become less selfish, and we actually start caring about people around us way more. And this is what is required for a good relationship, because otherwise you are not really putting your relationship first. I don't say that you have to put it first, but it should be one of your priorities. But take me back in my 20s, it was definitely not a priority for me. All the time, work and getting, like, feeling significant were way more important priorities for me. So you're right. To build a great relationship, to be really a partner who can appreciate the other person, and really to make them feel happy in the relationship and give love unconditionally, yeah, you want that maturity under your belt.
So one thing from your site that sticks out to me, and just reading how I don't know what page this is. It might be the about you or the testimonial, but you say one of the things that you do is help people recover from a breakup and move on quickly. That is easier said than done, I think. What is it about what you do that helps people to recover and move on quickly?
I The one thing that I believe helps most is to change your focus. When people break up, and usually the person who is in most pain is the one who has been dumped, and that person focuses on the pain of the breakup and starts to come up with all these ideas about how it could have been different, the regrets, the mistakes that they've made. And this is not helpful. It is crucial to shift that focus from living in the past to actually moving into the future. And one way to do so is what I call a new project. So you want to start doing something else that will occupy your headspace. And that could be something very, very, very different from, from, like, for different people, that would be a different thing. Someone will take up a new hobby. Another person would take a course and learn a new skill. Another person would go and find someone else immediately. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you put the focus on the future and on something new, not dwelling on the past. That's the best thing. It's like just like a metaphor. Imagine an infant or a real small kid, and let's say they fall down and they hurt a knee, and they start crying. But when, let's say, you cuddle them, you give them some comfort, and then you give them a toy, and they immediately stop crying. They immediately shift their focus from the pain to the toy, and they forget about the pain. And basically the same thing works for us adults as well.
Right. So I feel like maybe this sticks out to me because I feel like I'm one of those people. So I have a really long memory. So I tend to remember a lot of stuff. I can remember back to when I was like 2, 3 years old. I can remember the good, the bad, and the same with relationships. I almost had to like train myself to stop holding on to things so much and to just stop holding grudges and to look a little more into the future. I think that the first round of therapy I had I guess that was like 8 years ago now, 7, 8 years ago. I think that really helped me to train myself and give the therapist some credit. They helped train me as well to maybe be a little more in the present and in the future. And it's not easy to do. It's really, really hard. And I guess other than maybe the positive reinforcement, what else can be done to just kind of get yourself forward thinking and thinking about the present and the future?
Taking action, and taking massive action. This is what creates change in our nervous system, in our entire body, and in our outlook. When we do that, we really shift. Like our mind wants something to focus on, and if you sit around and you're grieving about your past relationship, you don't give it something new that it could focus on. But when you get up and you start doing something new, something else, that's where the focus goes automatically. It actually, our mind wants to go into something. It doesn't like to feel the same emotion all the time. So when you see it and you feel pain for a long time, your mind will want to shift to something new. So use that, take advantage of that, and give a new project to it.
So, with all this great stuff that you've learned in building up this company, what have you learned that has helped you just as an entrepreneur this time around?
I would say use video more, both in my work. So since I work in online, I shifted almost 100% from audio, like phone calls coaching, to video, Zoom and whatnot. And the second thing is that I use video more in my marketing, and that's, let's say, that's YouTube or Instagram. So I rely on video more, and I like it. I like video more than text, even
I
though
I think you're very good on video. I watched quite a few of the videos that you have on your YouTube page leading up to this episode, and frankly, I wanted to watch more. I'm like, maybe he can wait like 10 more minutes because this is really interesting. And I know that you're tackling a lot of issues that are very mainstream and things that everybody can relate to and know about. But you also tackle some stuff that's a little more taboo. And I'm curious to know what kind of inspired you to tackle that and make that a part of what you do. Because you're really like an all encompassing relationship coach. I feel like there aren't many topics you don't cover.
well, one of the taboo topics that I cover is porn and masturbation, and there are two reasons to it. The first reason is that I feel and I know actually that porn is really destructive for relationships and marriages. And the second reason is that I went through porn addiction myself, and I was able to get rid of it, and that made me relate to people with the same problem better, and knowing their situation and knowing how to help them better.
No, that's amazing. I mean, when I started really digging in, I couldn't help but think about somebody I dated very briefly who they were really cool and we had a really good time together, but they kept kind of like pushing me because I am like the complete opposite of somebody who's into like porn. Like that's just not my thing at all. It's never has been. It's just doesn't really interest me. But this one woman that I dated just kept pushing for me
Mm.
to partake. And I was just like, yeah, that doesn't really interest me. And I kept trying to brush it off, but they kept like trying to push it. I'm just like, well, I don't know if this is gonna work. If you're like this into it, like, I don't think this is gonna work because I'm just like, it's just not for me. It's not my thing. So I guess without really diving into too much detail, I'm almost kind of wondering if they themselves had an addiction to it, which I never really thought of it that way. But I mean, I know you can't answer that really because you don't know the person, but it just made me think of that time in my life where, it's just weird for me because that's just not how my mind is wired. I'm not really. It was never something I was interested in, but they were like determined to get me interested.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I was saying. And this is one way porn destroys relationships, because one partner likes it, the other one doesn't, and then the other partner gets upset about it because he he or she doesn't want to be pushed, and he or she actually gets jealous because the other person is watching porn and maybe even going into. Yeah, another problem with porn is that its intensity gets to increase over time, because when you watch one type of porn, you feel that, okay, that's good enough for now, but soon enough you get desensitized to it and you want more intensity, and this is what leads you to a pretty dark alley, at which can be detrimental to the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I totally feel those words 100% because I think if it wasn't for that, at the very least, I think our relationship would have lasted longer than, I don't know. I think we were together for like 2 months or so. It was a whirlwind summer of 2008 or so, I think. And, this is somebody who treated me really nicely. Like they took me to a Paul McCartney concert. Like, why wouldn't I want to date somebody taking me to a Paul McCartney concert? Like, that's amazing. But then they just had this other side that they were trying to push, but also weren't really talking about either, and were being kind of like aloof and secretive. It was very weird for me. It was just like after a month or two, I'm like, all right, I know they just did some really cool things for me, but this is just I'm out. Like this is just not this is weird for me.
Yeah, and you're
So,
right. You're totally right, because especially because this was a woman, and
yeah.
uh, based on my experience and my practice, it is when women are into porn, and especially in a way like this where they push the partner to do something about it and to do something with them, that is more weird than for men, because men are more naturally wired for porn because they like the visual component. But for women, this is different. They like the emotional component better, the emotional component of sex, and porn doesn't have it. So when a woman gets addicted to porn, that is, well, that is more complicated than with a man.
Yeah, I guess that's just something I never really was a part of my culture. Maybe I'm a little too much of a goody two shoes. I don't know, but it was just all too weird. And I know when I saw all of that in your on your YouTube, your fantastic YouTube page, I was like, man, I have to throw that into the dialogue because I wanted your perspective on that and really to just show just how all encompassing and deep. I mean, you're really covering everything on the surface, below the surface, and in between. And I think what you're doing as an entrepreneur is really cool and really great. I think you have a really great perspective. And yeah, it's fantastic what you're doing. And I keep looking up at the clock. I know you have somewhere you gotta be. So I'm going to throw it to you and ask you if somebody's out there listening and they want to get your services for anything, whether it's on the surface, below the surface, taboo, not taboo, how can they get your services? How can they reach out?
Yeah. please go to my website, which is romanmironov.com, spelled as ROMANMIRONOV.com. Hit the contact tab, sign up for a free coaching session with me, and make sure to let me know that you're coming off Mark My Words, and I'll be happy to give you a 30% discount. Or if you don't feel like talking to me, like from the get-go, you can actually hop on my newsletter and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I also want to again plug your YouTube channel. I found your videos to be so entertaining and informative and well put together. Are you doing all that editing?
No.
No?
I have a small team helping me.
Oh, so you do have a team.
Yeah.
I did not know that. So is this different from the translator job where did you have a team back then?
I mean, those are different teams. That team was all about translation, translators, editors, whereas this team that I have now, well, which is basically a couple people. One does web design. I'll say 3 people: web design, graphic design, and video editing.
Okay, so you did have a team for both jobs. It wasn't just all you the first time around.
Right.
Okay, cool. Well, that's another thing that's different. I would ask you more about that, but I want to give you a chance to go on to your next thing. So thank you, Roman, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on this show. It was amazing. It was a very fun conversation. And yeah, I loved learning about you and your journey. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been an honor to be with you.
All right, everybody. This was Roman Mironov, relationship coach. I am Mark Schmidt of Mark My Words, and I will be back very soon with a new episode. Thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.